Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Album Club on Heavy Metallurgy, and I'm joined by my two esteemed co-hosts, Jim from Eihwaz Recordings down there, Morbid Crank, and of course, Kellen from Killing for Company YouTube channel. Good to see you guys. Thanks for joining me again. As always, a lot of fun. How you been doing?
After some time away, I am happy to return. I had this man. I had one hell. Just as a side note, I had one hell of a crummy day. So after a terrible day at work, 2 weeks away from Heavy Metallurgy, where I was thrown under the bus as if I was avoiding 80s thrash hour with the guys. You know, it feels good to be back.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, Kellen. Before we get to Jim, let's talk about that for a second, because now we're doing some 2000s black metal, and looking left, looking right, who seems to be missing tonight?
TJ.
Something to say about that, Kellen? Is there something maybe that you want to say?
You know, for someone who talked a lot of trash, you know, all I can say is it's awful convenient when it came time to confront the so-called glorious swordsman. He's nowhere to be found. You know, all I gotta say is, TJ, if you want to talk it, you better back it up. So
That's right.
There you go. Next time, if you really want to share your thoughts about why Kellen is avoiding Wednesday thrash hour, when it comes time for Black Metal Wednesday, don't go running and crying and screaming. All right, this was your time. This was your time to come and own it, to say it to my face. And when you have the opportunity, what did you do? You went home and you claimed work and you got tired. It was awful convenient for you to not be here today. So there you go. Tuck your tail between your legs, run in the opposite direction. I don't want to hear it. From now on, when you got something to say, you better show up on Wednesday Album Club and say it to my face. All right, that's all I got.
Oh, Hercules. Anyway, so Jim, how are you doing?
I was having a shit day until that, man. Now I feel great.
That was awesome. Wow. Yeah.
That was amazing. That was the best rant you've ever done, man.
He's been taking notes from Alan in the rant department. It was great. Hey, everybody. Hey, Mark. Hey, Alan. What's up, Ben? Tim? Spirit of Death Metal. Oh, man. If this is NS, I'm sorry. I looked. I didn't see anything about it being, so I figured it was just romantic black metal. So we're rolling with it. And if it is, well, then screw me, I guess. But I think we're good. I think we're golden here. Yeah. It's good to see you guys. And I just wanted to say we put up a viewer's choice vote thing for album that we're covering next Wednesday, and out of 150 votes, 57% of the votes went for this album, Abigor's Nachthymnen from the Twilight Kingdom. So that's what we are covering next week. Classic Austrian black metal. Should be fun. Thanks everybody who put in a vote and voted and all that good stuff. We will do this maybe a bit more often. It's good to get into it. What do NS vampires drink? Is there an answer to this, or only white wine?
Oh my God.
Oh boy. Right on. Well, okay. Before we get started, let's maybe show off what we've been listening to this week. Just one little gem. Oh, Kellen, he's gone for 2 weeks and
I spaced it. Okay, hold on. I was just on Friday talking about what I've been listening to.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I remember.
Okay,
Jim,
hold on. Be right back.
How about you? What have you got?
The old corner, man.
That's my favorite corner, I think. I love the first three, but man, there's something really dark about that one. I love it.
Yeah, I love R.I.P. I love the follow-up as well, Punishment for Decadence, and don't really like No More Color. I know a lot of people do.
Oh, I love that one too. That's my second.
I think it sounds kind of commercial, man. It was a big disappointment to me. It just, I don't know, a lot of down picking. I don't know. All the shred-tasticness for me was on these first two records, but I really, really love RIP. So I can't, I've been digging that one again, and I can't wait to spin this. Just got this in today.
Yep.
Glorious Dead, maybe. So
That's right.
Get yours, everybody out there. Get yours.
Yep. Come and get it, folks. It's the release date's the 28th. I've got some pre-orders of stuff, but I'm trying to get caught up with mail orders still. It's been a 2-month run, but good stuff. Good stuff. For me, I've been finally getting around to checking out the new Psy record, Shiki, or Shikai. I have no idea how that is pronounced properly. I've seen a lot of Psy is one of those bands that's never really fully clicked for me. I liked some of the early stuff, but I find myself never listening to them. I threw this on, ended up Zoller sent it to me, and this album kind of rips. It's quite good. They're unique, really good production, very unique sounding, very interesting Japanese black metal. I really, really dug it. I'm kind of surprised how much I've been digging into this one. So yeah, I mean, the hype regarding this one, it seems like the people that like Psy love them through all eras and just love the band. And so I think I've heard the first 2 or 3, and that's really about it. They started getting pretty artsy fartsy for me, and I like that sometimes, but it's never really at the forefront of my listening. But yeah, this new Psy is pretty good. Check it out. Kellen.
All right. So I have here 4 Centuries. This is Epic Doom out of Mexico, entitled Before the Eyes of Doom. It's their debut full length. I've been hungry for some Epic Doom here in 2023. This is a new release, pretty limited distribution, but a while back, Tom over at Cine Arcadia Productions had like a Doom competition or whatever, and 4 Centuries, their EP, I pulled that out for discussion and kind of talk about it. But this is the debut full length, and been spinning this one on the drive to work.
Right on. Never heard of it. Typical. I mean, between you and Rick and Tom, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that gets shown. I'm like, I've never even heard it. Like, Rick is a king. He just about everything he shows, I have never heard or heard of. It's amazing. Pretty amazing.
Rick is awesome.
He's awesome. Absolutely. But the matter at hand tonight, we are gathering to talk about this album, Vampyric Blood, Nosferatu Darkness, the Loveless Nights in Tavastia. I didn't do a super bunch of digging for any stats on them other than the fact that they were formed in 2011. They're in Finland. It is a one-man project, Lord of Shadows. He's released 1 demo, 2 splits, 2 EPs, 3 full-length albums, and a little bit on the inside says Nosferatu Darkness, Loveless Nights in Tavastia was recorded between 2019-2022 in Dungeons of Misery with the guidance of Satan's divine darkness and the vivid turns of the night side path in pain and passion. Oh yeah. Mixed and mastered in Troll House Audio during the winter and spring of 2022. All nocturnal invocations and vampiric spells written and performed by Lord of Shadows. So there you go. Yeah, first impressions. Jim, we'll start with you. I'm curious to hear what Jim thought about this one.
Man, in a non-word, oof. Yeah, man. I during the 2010s, which is when I really started getting deeper into underground black metal, it's sort of like what's the right word for this? Not so great drum programming and weird pitch transposing on the vocals here and there. That kind of stuff had an appeal to me, but it just feels a little tired to me now. And I was just kind of like taken back to that, and kind of never really left that vibe for me. So we'll get into into the details later, but yeah, first impressions was all of this I've heard before, and all of it I've heard done better. So
Fair enough. Kellen.
You could say, first impression, but also a part of this for me is expectation. I definitely thought I was going to hear something a bit more traditionally Finnish when I found out where the act was from, and that was the biggest sort of caught me off guard initially. Did not sound like it's from Finland by any means.
No.
So then it became a question of how can I place this? Like, where are the major influences coming from? And we'll get into that, but that was probably the major sort of piece for me, is trying to figure out, okay, well, obviously there's plenty of like 90s black metal sort of classic genre on display here, but I never really could place, where the primary influences were and what was the major aim for this record. So we'll get into that later.
All right. For me, obviously I picked it, so I like it. And I am, people on here see me, ranting and raving about Halloween and power metal. Yeah, it's very much part of my listening diet, but so is raw black metal. I love it. The more simplistic and raw and nasty, it often trumps the more popular and well-produced stuff for me, because it just feels like it maintains the raw spirit of the genre. And I bought this cheap from somewhere thinking, okay, that's what I'm going to get. And to my surprise, this brought a lot more. Conceptually, it was a lot more expansive, sonically more expansive. It's actually, there's production value here. There's room ambience here. I was kind of blown. I listened to this record a lot, to be honest. I think it's quite exceptional, and it just has a epic and flowing sorrow about it. And even sometimes with some of the simplistic synths in the background, it has kind of a cinematic feel to it. Yeah, there's some Count Chocula type, evil Dracula type vocals here and there, which puts me in mind a bit of a Cradle of Filth, but that's really the only comparison. This is definitely on the raw black metal side of a black metal musician that is punching up, he's writing songs and compositions outside of his technical ability, I think. And I think the album benefits from that. There's a lot of simplistic lines going on, but everything tied together. It's got a lot of vibe and feel to it for me. And I thought it was kind of an impressive record. It makes me curious to hear the other stuff, to be honest. But I threw something together here in the last minute. I had an idea in my head, but I don't know if I really got it out here with this question. But in literature, vampirism has always been a perversely romantic or gothic has also a perversely romantic or gothic connotation attached to it. It was inevitable it would make its way into metal, of course. The topic and the mythology seem to complement each other very well, or do they? The most popular band, Cradle of Filth, focused on this dark romanticism and ran with it. Success followed them because of it, and so did an element of undeniable cheese. It is difficult to work within this. Is it difficult? Read your own words, Marty. Is it difficult to work within this conceptual medium and not come off as an Anne Rice disciple? Has Vampyric Blood avoided this pitfall? What do you guys think? Kellen, we'll start with you.
So it's a good question. Is it difficult to work within the conceptual medium? So I guess for me, it does make plenty of sense to associate this kind of music. Like, I don't know when exactly, Cradle of Filth is the example we used here, but when you start to include symphonic elements of black metal, what's interesting for me is, as much as black metal was kind of like an FU to death metal and trying to get back to something raw and primitive. It also, the iconography was associated with like the wealthy oligarchs of Europe. You know what I mean? Like all the iconography, it's not like it's the peasant working class. It's always like the ancient kings and, you know, in their castles and so on and so forth. Like you get into this class element with black metal and its icons. And I think that works for a certain degree of like black metal elitism. Like in the sense that you want it to be not part of the dominant prevailing like social class, like the commoners, right? I think it works well when you take element of black metal sort of elitism and the iconography associated with what vampirism is. I don't necessarily think you run into the world of Anne Rice sort of romance novels, right? I think there's plenty of vampire literature and movies, film, etc. that like the Nosferatu on the cover, that film is totally different than an Anne Rice novel, right? Like that film is pretty grotesque and horrifying, and so
the proportions of him are way bigger than
there's something
drawn by someone's 16-year-old sister. It's fine. It's cool. Anyway.
So we're pulling back and looking at like the vampire Nosferatu iconography. I think it works well for the kind of individualism and elitism and solitary world that black metal commonly is associated with, specifically when you look towards second wave black metal or Norwegian black metal. What's interesting is this also, to me, tends to rope in a little bit of Greek. To me, this sounds far more, and we get into the songwriting later, but sonically, as much as we associate like the vampire world and that kind of raw black metal, I think with second wave black metal, this tends to rope in different parts of the second wave when I listen to it. I don't find it to be cliche, nor do I think every black metal band or album that focuses on vampirism is necessarily overly romantic. Like the Pale Swordsman that we talked about, that was very much leaning into that in a way that I don't think most black metal bands do. So I don't think this was trying to be deliberately cliche, and I actually didn't come away thinking it was so romantic that it would be potentially detrimental to the record. I think it has other challenges, but for me, vampirism in black metal makes plenty of sense, and I think it has been developed for a reason. I don't think it's coming out of trying to exploit a specific horror genre. I do think there are other sort of influences that go along with the vampire mythology that work well for the genre. So I'm not surprised to see it here and with other bands within black metal.
Alan's on fire tonight. Well said.
Grenades.
Yeah, well said, Kellen. What do you think, Jim?
The vampire theme of this band is probably the one thing I don't have an issue with on this album. I like Kellen, I agree. I think that really just the vampire theme is very metal, and the way I took the songs, even though there's in the title, the Loveless Nights in Tavastia, so that implies like a little bit of romanticism, but for me mostly it felt more like the mystique of vampirism was really more his intent, and also some of like the bloodletting. I mean, some of the lyrics like on the title track are lying cold and naked on the stone floor, a throne of their lifeless empty shells. I mean, it's sort of like first person of the vampire talking about his victims and laying them behind. And so for me, I didn't hear a lot of romanticism in that. It felt more monstrous in a way, but in a good kind of horror movie sort of way. I think that so he achieves that sort of mystique very well. And I do see that there's an argument for vampirism being played out. There was that time in the about 10 years ago where every other movie or every other TV show, everybody was jumping on the vampire bandwagon. It just seemed like you couldn't get away from it. That has largely died down. And as as I haven't listened to a Cradle of Filth song since probably the year 2000, that's so far off my radar. Like, that sort of topic seemed almost fresh to me, really, though I still love that song "Ghost in the Fog" by Cradle of Filth. That's an awesome song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. The early stuff was cool. But yeah, I think he managed to transcend that, and even with the cheesy cover or whatever, to Kellen's point, that Nosferatu image, conjures up, more, a sense of darkness, and yeah, there's the naked lady and all that. But again, I don't get romance out of it. I get more like mysterious and terrifying. So I think he dodged sort of the cheese bullet. Musically, maybe not. Aesthetically, yes, but we'll get into that.
Right. And for me, when I posed this question, I was predominantly thinking of like gothic bands, and I was thinking of Cradle of Filth. Obviously they adopted the Anne Rice gothic thing and mixed it in with what they were doing. And romanticism in metal, I struggle with it. I'm not going to lie. Like bands like My Dying Bride, as soon as he started, as soon as they kind of moved away from Death Doom and started bringing on the gothic elements and the breathless whining type vocals and the, drinking wine and my dead lover type song lyrics, and it's just gross to me. And I see this, I bought it on a whim. I figured it would be harsh black metal. And again, it wasn't. And even though there were little elements here and there, I think this band avoided the cheese. I like Jim's, like more monstrous approach to the whole idea, the whole mythology of vampirism or whatever. That's quite good, but he did it in a cinematic way. There's just so much atmosphere going on this record. I was quite impressed with it. Like I said, you could tell there was a lot. It seems very simplistic, and he's got a motif. Someone mentioned this might be the guy from Drowning the Light. It might be. I don't know. It just said Finland. It might be him. I have no idea. It could be. If it is, that guy is super prolific. He's got way too much time on his hands. And if this is him, it's way different than his other projects. And I think it's cool because of that, because some of his other projects all really run together. Way too many releases. But yeah, the whole vampirism thing, it's not as widespread as you would think in black metal, but maybe because bands like Cradle of Filth kind of cheesed it up. I don't know, but this here, it works. It worked for me. I thought it was really good. I thought he did a good job with it. But let's talk about the musicality and composition of Nosferatu Darkness. Jim.
Well, here it goes. I'm going to try not to just overtly slam it. I got to talk about the drum programming, man. Is it programmed drums? I was listening to it. It's so simplistic. It might be someone playing drums. You don't think so? Think so. Okay. I think these are definitely programmed, man. I
Probably
hear a lot of repetition, and even in that, for like one man black metal, programmed drums are just fine. I have tons of CDs and vinyl of one man black metal with electric drums. I don't have a problem with that, but what I do have a problem with is in this era, it's so easy, and I'm speaking experience because I played around with it too. And nowadays it's super easy to do something that even sounds a little more complex with synthetic drum machines and stuff. And I just feel like some of this programming is super lazy, man. There's like one song, I think it's Among the Ruins Decay, where he's just going bat 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 bap, 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 bap. And it's like, and he's just hitting the snare, and it's like bap, 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 1, 2, 3, bap, 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 1. And it's seriously distracting to me. So, and and there was a time, I mentioned this earlier, back, the 2010s, where I loved super silly, like really badly produced, one man bedroom black metal. Like I didn't care. And I think for me at that time, it was still kind of fresh, but here we are, 13 years later, and it just annoys me now, because I feel like, it doesn't take that much effort to kind of clean it up a little bit. So it was really distracting for me. And, the guitar playing, there's a certain key that he stays in, which we're talking about metal here. There's not a lot of key exploration in metal, unless you're technical in genre, which is fine. But his melody lines, I heard a lot of repetition. He was staying in like the same, chord structure, like almost every song, and it just felt like everything was running together to me. From a guitar playing perspective and from a drum programming perspective. Now, on the good side, I did like that he played around with some unexpected tempos that you don't usually find in black metal. This wasn't like blasting all the way through. On Nosferatu Darkness, it's when it comes out of that sort of like typical Dark Throne fast, and then but when the verses kick in, it's got an almost kind of a rock, behind the backbeat sort of a beat. And I was really surprised by that. And I liked it. I appreciated that. I didn't expect it. So even though like the program as a whole, I feel is very sloppy, I feel that, and conversely, that his choices in tempos were outside of the norm of what you'd hear from like a raw black metal production. And in fact, one of the song that I like the most on the album, In the Midst of the Bloodlust Force, like it's a straight 4/4, and it definitely again has a rock kind of a feel, but in the context of like, one man bedroom black metal, like it felt so alien to me. Like I actually enjoyed it. Like I felt like it had a place. So, I'm kind of like talking out of both sides of my mouth here. I'm saying like, felt the program is sloppy. I think the beats are good, but that is kind of that is the effect of it for me. Like I feel like the execution left a lot to be desired, but I felt like the ideas were there, and I felt like there was something to build off of. So I question, the guitar, the melody lines of the guitar playing. I felt like there wasn't a lot of exploration there, and I felt like that he could have done more. And so that was, for me, kind of a turn off, luckily there was a balance there. Something else to kind of grasp onto was the synth performances. I think the keyboards on here, even though we're not talking about Emperor, this guy is no prodigy, we're not talking about, classical scales being ran or anything like that. I mean, very subtle keyboards, definitely, steeped in the atmospheric realm, but they added color. They added color to the songs and made them a little bit more, or maybe even a lot more expansive than they would have been without it. So what I found myself doing on multiple listens with this record was like paying attention to those atmospherics and kind of like zoning in on that. And so I think that, if the guy's listening, hey, you're doing a great job with that, but maybe explore a little bit more with your melody lines, maybe spend a little more time, with your drum software. So there it is, musical composition for me.
Right on. Kellen.
It's a good, in terms of the drum side of things. I was on kind of with Marty. I thought it was just a very rudimentary drumming, but deliberately so.
The software has gotten so good nowadays. Right, it's easy to fool everybody. It really is.
But I really came across as someone who was trying to like, just if you were to take the drum, what do you want to say, performance, and you could cut and paste it onto like raw black metal, in terms of how it would actually play out, it would seem like that's how you would approach a raw black metal listen. Whatever, your bedroom sort of simple stuff for the drowning the light fans out there. But
I got way more drowning the light than
we know how you
I got,
Marty.
tons and tons of it. Not all of it's great, but a lot of it's pretty solid. Anyway,
but I to Jim's point, what I had a difficult time with is this record seemed, or this specifically, this artist seemed to be pulling from various schools. So the melodic component to the guitar lines and the riffs, they're relatively simple. They almost mirror a lot of the drumming.
they're very atypical, though. The harmonies are pretty atypical, which I appreciated. I don't know what you're going to go. Sorry.
The harmonies, especially the lead that plays over the riff, they're simple, right? It's not the complexity of it, right? So then you get into this point where is that leaning it to me, because it is a bit more melodic. It doesn't, necessarily sound just like Rotting Christ of Varathren, though. For me, there was a certain ugliness to those Greek black metal bands that I don't think this record touches. More importantly, there's also a spatial quality to this. Like I came away from this record feeling like it was by no means an ambient record, but it lacks the density to stand along some like a symphonic band like Emperor, for example. So it never goes fully in one direction. It seemed to be an interesting balance of various schools of 90s black metal. So I really had a difficult time, placing it. But I guess in terms of the songwriting, the way I would probably primarily describe this record is a sort of smooth sailing melodic black metal listen.
Sailing. Little Christmas crossover.
He waited for me to take a breath and sneak that in there, unpause his mic and jump on in.
Little Christopher Cross for y'all out there.
That's right.
We're bringing it tonight. But there's just something evenly paced about this entire listen. So being able, like people have talked about in the chat, to kind of like put it on his background music and just let this thing ride. It reminded me a little bit, and you can tell me it's not nearly as raw, but the Polish band Christ Agony. I don't know if you know them at all, but like
I do,
yeah. But they kind of got these long. It's not doomy necessarily, but the compositions are a bit more extended. So there's a lot of open space on this record to just kind of sail away, if you will. So
Nice.
but it wasn't a complicated listen. I didn't find it to be an aggressive black metal record, but there's an interesting sort of like ease to the melodic approach of this. I didn't think, though, to your point, Marty, like it does not venture so far into like the whatever Cradle of Filth goth. I don't think it goes that far. I just think it sort of introduces a little bit of like a warmer guitar sound specifically. We'll get into production later. But there's a primary sort of melodic component to the way that they're writing the songs. Probably the detraction I would have into the songwriting is none of it like really grabbed a hold of me. I never found like there was a real riff that like stuck in my head and felt like I needed to go back to return to it. I feel this is much more a record that sort of just cruises. So the one thing that kept it from being like a, Rotting Christ or Varathren at their best, those songs you could return to. There's like very specific, almost, I don't want to say like heavy metal, but there was a kind of like songwriting, specifically guitar playing to their records that felt a bit more familiar in terms of a heavy metal sound. This feels to me a bit more of like an expansive black metal listen. So
yeah, for me, the songwriting and composition, I really like the fact that other than a few choruses that come in that are a little disjointing on purpose, like Nosferatu Darkness, the title track, it just kind of says the name of the album of the song. It's just kind of a da 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 da. It kind of like breaks out of this flow, but for the most part, you're on this flow of like on a lazy river of vampiric tears. Is what you're in a little tube floating along, and it's a sad journey. And I like the fact that when I listen to this record, I don't care about what song's what. They all kind of flow together. There's not a lot of differentiation between tracks. They all just flow, and I think it's the track Werewolf Night. It's basically just an ambient piece. There isn't even really any music. It's just a very short ambient piece, maybe some wind, some whatever crap going on. It's just a one little element in this flow that like piles on the cinematic touch a little bit. But I like the fact that I can sit and not think about it and just kind of be swept up in the vibe of it. And I know I've said I've tried to get away from sad music. This is a sad record for me. I'm not like crying listening to it. I'm just saying that there is a vibe. It mixes raw black metal with a great roomy ambient production and the ambience to go along to sell, the looking out over a full moon, illuminated valley with fog in it. I mean, that's kind of the vibe I get when I listen to this thing. And summoning. I'm not saying these guys are summoning caliber. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying the world building nature of summoning. There's a hint of it here. Is it as, refined and amazing as summoning? No. Not even the same caliber. No, exactly. I'm not saying that, but it puts me in that state where I'm a part of it, but I'm not really conscious of what's what, or sweet riff or whatever, because it is all the songwriting is very simplistic, and I'm a big fan of simplistic lines. When all these simplistic lines interlock and create something bigger, and I think that's where this album triumphs, to be honest. Production, Kellen.
Yeah, so production here was probably one of the first things that said this is not a finished black metal record to me.
It doesn't sound finished at all, and it's probably not. It's probably a lie. Anyway.
Well, maybe that's the guy in Australia just posing and being in Finland.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. But for the production here, everything, for a solo black metal act on Dark Adversary, which is on like a major label by any means, it sounds clean, clear, composed. It was interesting. I mentioned earlier the warmer elements to this, and this is on my, whatever, in the back of my head because I've been listening to the Hades records that came in. Those had a prominent bass presence, right? Those feel like a completely filled in kind of guitar section. I did not hear a lot of bass on this record, and it almost seems to like deliberately follow where the guitars are going. It doesn't splinter off to me in any way. It's just not a large part of this record. But it also does not get in the way of, to what Jim was talking about earlier, sort of the synth background stuff. So all these sort of secondary, tertiary instruments that are adding to it, you can hear them distinctly in the background.
You can hear everything, even the bass, clean bass. It's all. Anyway, go ahead. We'll talk about that.
It's very well produced record, and by no means. It also, there's an element traditionally with black metal where it feels a bit sibilant or scathing, like the higher register seems to grate at you, and that's part of what you enjoy about a black metal listen. I never felt that on this. To Marty's lazy river of tears, like you can hop in your tube and just kind of put your sunscreen on and cruise in this thing, because it's not going to be so abrasive where it's challenging to listen to. For as much as it is a true black metal record, there's something easy about this. The drums, for example, like hearing crash, cymbal, hi-hat, ride, all of that is clear as day. But none of it feels like it's ever like sibilant or piercing through on this record, which shows, even if this is a one-person compute, like producing on their computer, like how far it's come, that they could control it to a certain degree that it would become, clear enough, but also still sound like a natural instrument. So a very well-produced record for a black metal listen. So I think if you wanted to sort of steer into like what's interesting about something like a summoning comparison, you can sell it. It is a one that is produced in a very deliberate and concerted effort. So,
yeah. I will say about the drums, the fastest it gets, I want to say it's like a hammer blast. This is like a but it's like a slowed down hammer blast, and it's kind of different. It's like a war metal drum beat played slower with different kind of guitar. It's kind of cool. It's like, wow, that it's kind of a different way of selling a fast part. I thought that was kind of neat about the album. But Jim, you're up.
Okay, so we're production, right? So I actually agree that as the only way that this is raw really is in the fact that obviously it's super underground. It's one man black metal. Lots of electronic accompaniment, but to Kellen's point, yeah, there is a balance here. It isn't that like what's that band like Arno Pavla, those guys that are just basically it's like all the trebles all the way on 10, all the bass and the mids are out. It's distortion in your ears for 30 minutes. But yeah,
Arnold Palmer. I didn't know he was.
I'm pronouncing it wrong.
I'm kidding. I just remind me.
We'll grab it. You're good.
It's Arno something. Oh, yeah, Arno here. Arno Arnaut Pavle. Arno Pavla. They're from Finland. Anyway, I got a couple of their tapes, but anyway, but yeah, this is it's well produced, super underground black metal, which is really kind of weird, to even say that out loud. But the bass sound is, it's clean, but it's good, and it's a good bass sound. And Tamari, I agree, you're right. You can hear it, and you guys know I hate when bass is buried, and it's not on this. It's also not overbearing. We're not hearing like 8 drops or whatever they call them. It's still black metal. The guitars are up there, and they blend in well with the synths. They're really sort of really, it's like the guitars are just above the synths, which is what I like them to be. I don't like the synths to bury the guitars, but I don't like the synths to be buried either. And so I think the way the guitars are just above them in the mix, it works out really well. Where I think there's some failures are, vocals are a little loud for me. Not so much the main vocal, which I think he does a pretty good job. In some areas, he reminds me of early Leviathan, which I really like that style of black metal vocal. But I don't like the pitch transposed deep voice talking stuff.
Count Chocula.
Yeah, I don't like the Count Chocula thing. That kind of, it like brought me out of it every time when that would come on. So I think that was just kind of a weird studio choice. I mean, I get what he was going for. He just wanted something maybe Vincent Price-ish to take it down that vampire lane or whatever. But I think he ended up missing the mark there with that. So yeah, I think production wise, it's a successful album. I surprisingly don't have any issues with it. Just a few, minor gripes, but nothing that would have kept me from listening to it. It's really just more about, again, I keep coming back, for me, it's like the execution of it as a whole, that was a little, off color for me. And also I just think the melody lines are really repetitive. Now I will call out, I have to call this out. In the song, Among the Ruins Decay, near the end, the orchestration that's going on with the synths and the guitar line are unintentionally dissonant. It's like the orchestration's in one key and the melody line of the guitar is in another, and it just sounds every time I get there, like I was like grabbing my headphones. Like
I didn't catch that. That's like one of my favorite songs on the album too.
Well, it's my least favorite.
Right.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
But that's largely why. And but go back and listen to like the last 45 seconds or so, and you'll hear it. And man, I there's a small chance, of course, that he could have made that a decision intentionally, but I hear it as just a bad mistake. And again, so I think that the theme for me on this album is a lot of great ideas, but not executed well. So there it is.
Colin.
I think I talk about production?
You did. Sorry. It's funny. When I first bought this record, my buddy Noah was over, and he's a black metal musician. Check out Northern Spire Productions, by the way. We were listening to this in the basement, having a couple beers and listening to it kind of loud. And the louder it's turned up on a better system, not that my system's great by any means. I have Facebook Marketplace Pioneer speakers and a Goodwill system kind of jimmied together, but it sounds good. And my buddy Noah's gotten very into like mixing and mastering and stuff. And he was even he's like, wow, you can hear everything. You can hear everything, the fullness of it. The vocals even, he has just the right amount of reverb and stuff on the vocal. It seems really well considered and put together, whether that's all happy accident or, it's been working, obviously if it's who we think it is, he's put out enough records. He should know how to record at this point. But, I like Jim said, the bass lines are clear. The harmonies, the guitar harmonies, someone said the guitars are thin. Yeah. You start messing with frequencies, being in the studio and mixing stuff. If your bass has got too much low end, it's going to affect a kick drum, or there's like this balancing act. And it's, whether this guy is actually recording real instruments or if he's using plugins or, drum software, it's a lot easier to work with that way. But you start messing with one frequency, it messes with other things. And this, the guitars might be a little thin, but that's part of the nature of underground black metal. Thin buzzing guitars. But to me, everything cuts through. And like Jim said, that the synth work, it could have very easily stepped all over everything, could have stepped over the guitars, but it's set in the back just where it needs to be. It's kind of, illuminating everything, which I really appreciate. And that's one of the reasons why I picked this, because TJ hates black metal to begin with. And then I figured I was going to pick something with some sort of production value so he could at least not have to complain about that. But, the production, I think for what this is, a one-man deal, I think it's exceptional. That he did a really good job. And it highlights the fact you can hear everything and the sound of it. These guys don't sound like anybody to me, which I think is cool. And they do so by utilizing a lot of elements that everybody else uses. They're working with the same ingredients. They're still making a bowl of macaroni and cheese. It's still macaroni and cheese, and they're using all the same ingredients that comes out of the box, but somehow maybe put a little extra spice in here or something. I don't know. Put a fancy Gouda in there in the mix. I think that's really cool that he somehow came up with his own sound in a field littered by bands that sound exactly the same. And another thing, like, Kellen stated early on, if this is indeed a Finnish band, it doesn't sound remotely Finnish. Finnish black metal has a sound. It's not this. And I think that's cool. I think that's really cool. Least favorite songs. Jim, we'll start with you.
I think that, Nosferatu Darkness, which obviously comes, right after the intro, Reveling in Lycanthropic Mysteries, is a great introduction to what this album is. And kind of like, actually for me, like what it could have been, because it's the highlight and it comes early. And, I like how it starts out in that, fast tempo, and I mentioned this earlier, but then it goes into that slow, almost kind of a rock beat, which was a great surprise for me. And I think the atmosphere on the keys is well considered here. But and then I kind of take that back, because I really like In the Midst of the Bloodlust Forest 2, the third track. I thought that one was just as strong, if not even stronger. The tempo there is again, it's driving, it's moving, and the sorrow of the sound comes across really well. There's some really bad drum fills in that, though, that sort of take it down a notch for me in that song. Just like dun 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 dun, 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 dun. You know, I'm like, what, dude? You're just banging on the toms, man, and you're programming a robot to do it, whatever. It just doesn't sound right. But other than that, it's pretty good. But so those tracks 2 and 3 are pretty good. But you know, and I looks like I'm going to be in the minority here. You just said it's your favorite song, and I saw someone else in the comments say too. But I just hated Among the Ruins Decay, man. That weird, unintentionally dissonant guitar and line mixed with orchestration. You know, just two keys going on at once at the end were just really bad. The drum programming super awkward throughout to me, and the melody line is repetitive to the point where I just didn't want to hear it anymore. It was like it was a chore for me to get through the song. So, you know, I would suggest if you haven't listened to this yet, then don't even listen to track 5. You know, I know Marty's going to come up with a completely different opinion, but
we all hear the same piece of music differently. It's the way it goes.
we all do. You know, so I'm not a fan.
Well, here you go. Tim's on your side.
That's cool. But yeah, Gruesome Powers, I think, you know, kind of an unnecessary instrumental, but it closes well for Ravishing Wind from the North. That one's got its melody line, I think, is a little bit more interesting than the other ones that came before, and the way that the melody line kind of sort of like snakes around the keyboards is really cool. So but yeah, so in closing, tracks 2 and 3, great. Number 5, not so much.
All right, Kellen.
Okay, so actually, my least favorite track, if you want to go ahead and call it a track, is the lead off. I really thought that the Reveling in Lycanthropic Mysteries is a little bit like a just underwhelming way to start the record, I guess is the way I would describe it. I think personally this record is at its best during the longer compositions. So track 3, In the Midst of the Bloodlust Forest, track number 6, Loveless Nights in Tavastia. We've all been there. And the closer... I actually, if anyone wanted to know what this record is about, that just listen to the final track. To me, that the closer, it's like the longest track here, 11 minutes long. If you were just wanted to sample, I think what this band or artist has as potential to do, I mean, I think it's probably all comes together on the closer, which is a good way to end this record. So for the third track, you know, personally for me, that's when I actually would stop and pay attention to what was going on, just because I think in the more space they have to work with, the record feels, you know, like it's at its peaking in terms of stylistically. I don't like the wannabe blast beat parts. That it just feels to me too mundane. I actually think when there's a lot more open space to work with, they're doing a better job. And I think just in a passing piece, I would say is like, I know that Marty, you mentioned that this record just sort of like you cruise through it. You don't think about it with individual songs per se. I wish, did they really need to have, you know, instrumental or ambient in-betweens on this record? Like the second to last piece, I think if they just included it or found a way to bring them all together, it would have made more sense in terms of a track listing.
Yeah.
But I just felt like they didn't really add anything to the record. During the songs, they aren't dynamic enough to actually feel like you need a respite in an instrumental.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why I like the Werewolf Night. It's so brief. It's almost, I don't even know why it's got its own track. It was just like a skip in the road. But that, again, I struggled to find songs I liked and disliked because I've just been taking it in as a whole album. I haven't even looked. Tonight's the first I opened up the insert on this thing. I just don't read the stuff. And if it's a good record to me, I shouldn't have to. It says everything I need to hear coming out of the speakers, you know. Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, it is our mission on Album Club to pay attention to the track list. So when you ask us this question, I come prepared. So
Right.
I did my homework appropriately here.
I did my homework too. I got stuff wrote down, but it was a struggle. Especially because YouTube and I couldn't find a track by track. I had to someone put it up as a solid video. I'm like, damn it. So I'm like, okay, I know the anchor points, Nosferatu Darkness. It says it in the title. And then I'm looking through the lyrics like, oh, there's that song. So I know which. I had to do a little more investigative reporting than I wanted to. But okay, you good?
I'm good.
Again, for me, this album I took in processed as one solid piece. So, but digging in, Nosferatu Darkness is the first standout track for me. I like it a lot. The chorus is just basically, the name of the song and a couple other things, and then going into this weird hammer blast, halftime hammer blast. It's just catchy and it's jolting from the flow. It's got a weird little sidestep augmentation in the flow of the song. My favorite is Among These Ruins Decay. What I write down about that? It's a unique musical progression, plotting and simplistic. Drum work lets the atmosphere breathe. And going back to Jim's, it's funny when you're talking about the drums. I'm like, I didn't even think of it as a problem, nor do I even really consider the drum work on here. I listen to it; it sounds realish to me. But the drums are so minimal, they're like a means to an end. They're keeping time. There's so much other, I'm so focused when I'm listening to this on the atmosphere of it, the feel of it. I don't even care that there's no Neil Peart or, super sloppy drum fills. I don't even consider them. They don't even really register on my radar. I'm so absorbed in what's going on behind, what it's propelling forward. And it's interesting. And now next time I listen to it, I'm going to pay more attention to the drum. Cause like I said, it's just a timekeeper at this point. I think it's so, and obviously if he's programming them, he wanted to keep it simplistic to not take anything away from what he had constructed on top of the rhythm. So
then he succeeded.
Yeah, he did. Right. Other favorites, title track, Love the Feel and Flow, Mournful, Ravishing Wind from the North. There's a few weird transitions in that song that kind of divert me from the flow. They almost seemed a bit forced. Was it 11-minute song? He's trying, it could have ended, but he did some things to build on it to make it longer. I think he could have taken a good 3 minutes off that song and it had been a little bit better. There's a one weird transition in it, when really sitting and listening to it on headphones, I'm like, okay, he's just trying to get more mileage. He's trying to fill in time. But that's only when I'm sitting paying attention. If I'm working and put this on, I listened to this album 3 times today. And it wasn't because I had to, it's because I wanted to. And this is one of those records when I put it on, I listen to it multiple times. It's just a cool, I dig the vibe because of it. Judgment, final thoughts. Jim, I think I know where you stand on this one.
Yeah. There's just too much good metal out there for me to probably ever visit this one again. It's not my bag. If I'm gonna listen to a one-man black metal band these days, it's got to be well executed. It's got to be. It doesn't have to be as good as Panopticon, but it's got to be pretty damn good. And it's either got to be super raw or super layered and atmospheric. Those are my one-man black metal bands that I like, and I feel like this band is right in the middle of both, and doesn't really get on my radar in either direction enough for me to want to hear it again. So for me, it's definitely a C-, D+, man. I was.
That's why I picked it. We had such a long run of thrash. I wanted something completely opposite of that. I wanted something that not everybody. Yeah. I knew TJ wasn't going to like it. I didn't know where you guys were going to stand. I knew I liked it, but I didn't. I like some shit that sucks. So.
No. It's this is we challenge each other once in a while, and but yeah, I didn't know what to expect, and I other than I knew it was gonna be black metal, but yeah, it's just not for me, man. You know what I mean? Like I said, if it's gonna be one man controlling all the instruments, one man controlling all the knobs, I either want to hear something that's super layered and atmospheric that kind of takes me on a journey that way, or just something that's like black metal punk, again, Arno Pavlo, by the way, who was, I was just reading up, the name was taken from a Serbian guy who thought he was a vampire and murdered 16 people. So pretty cool. There's a little bit of vampire connection there too. but yeah, super raw, or super atmospheric, and I just feel like this is neither. So
right on. Kellen.
Yeah, I'm gonna go back. We're gonna head back into the kitchen where your macaroni and cheese is cooking.
I don't even care if it's bad macaroni and cheese. It's still macaroni and cheese, and therefore awesome.
We must have. I mean, I don't know what the story is, but I in my notes I wrote, trim the fat, let it stew a little longer, not quite ready to serve. It to me, yeah, like there are parts of this record that feel aimless. And another part of it that I feel like there's a greater depth. What he is doing, I think is not like needs to be explored to a greater extent. To me, this is they know the rules and they're playing by them, but it just ends up being a mediocre listen for me as a consequence. Like none of it feels like it is top tier. I like the idea, and I think you're right in the sense that it doesn't sound like a lot of other bands right now, right? If this had sounded like another raw black metal band, one of the billion that are out there, like I would have just absolutely tossed it to the side. If it did sound like a more conventional symphonic black metal listen, I would have absolutely, like I'll never touch it again. This feels to me like I'm not compelled to listen to it, but just because I don't think it does anything exceptionally well. As much as it is sort of has its sort of ingredients from different schools. So if it were to come back and like bring a greater level of depth or mastery within one of those disciplines, I would be more interested and more, compelled to listen. More than anything, just because it's a good record, I kind of feel like it's going to get lost in the shuffle. It doesn't offend me by any means, but it also doesn't sort of surprise me or wow me. So, like I listened to it today, like for sure. I probably listened to this repeat 4 times in a row. There was nothing offensive about it. I just could let it, drift along. But I would like, if it was going to pursue something that was a bit more on the melodic Greek side, like I think there's plenty of room to grow there. If you want to take it into like a different kind of Gothic territory, there's greater depth there. Like, for example, as strange and, let's just take 2 other black metal listens that you've listened to from Finland. When Jim picked Beharit, you picked Unholy. Both those records have tons of personality.
They're both simplistic,
compelling, right?
Yeah.
They aren't wowed by their musicians, but there's such unique atmosphere and individuality to both of them.
Yep.
It's sort of desire to be pulled off the shelf because of how unique they are. I think that's what's missing on this record. It doesn't have that sort of persevering identity. So I don't know if we'll get there, but nonetheless, like not a bad listen by any means.
Well, I picked it. Obviously, I like it, and again, it doesn't take much to impress me. If the songs are solid, and they are solid, they're simplistic, but I like the way they're constructed. I like the way they're layered. Would I have liked more variation on the record? To Kellen's point, there's room for growth here, and yeah, I would like to maybe hear a little more variation on the next record. And that's where the challenge is. I have not heard anything before it. I have not heard, and obviously there's nothing new after it, but I'm happy where this one sits. I like the journey it took me on, and I find myself returning to it because, again, I think it's something a little bit different than what, it's coming out in a certain realm of underground black metal. It's doing something a little more colorful than that, which I think is very cool. And is there room for growth? Absolutely. Do I hope it happens? Absolutely. If they put out another record like this, it's kind of pointless. for what it is, this one's good. And I give this one a B plus, A minus. Yeah, I liked it that much, which is weird. It's weird, but it scratches that itch for some reason. It's sad. It's kind of world building, and it's unique, even though it's kind of creating a somewhat average flow. It's still kind of unique, and I dig that. So yeah, that's it. We got through it. Something a little bit different. And next week again, we're doing Abigor's Not Thy Him and from the Twilight Kingdom. And I just got informed that Ben will be joining us next week. He loves this record. He wants to join us and spew about it for a while. So I said, absolutely. Yeah. Do you guys have anything you'd like to? Oh, one bit of show note. Matt from the Dark Path will be on Friday. And what's the topic? I can't remember the topic. Bands that are go-to to recommend people that are asking, what are our go-to bands when people ask about metal? What bands do we recommend to people who are just getting into metal or whatever? I think that's the gist of the plot. But yeah, so that's happening. And what's going on with you guys? What's coming up this week? Anything good?
So sometime this weekend, hopefully I'll be getting together with Marty over here to talk about, let me put the cat to the side. This was talked about last week. But...
Okay. That's this weekend. I'm completely fine with that.
Yeah, we'll work it out. If it hasn't happened this weekend, in the near future, look for that.
I'm fine with it this weekend. I'll
Okay.
I'll reconvene on digging into this again. I kind of given it a break, but I'll jump back in.
Okay. And then I'm also going to be working on an episode that'll bring back my Blood from Stone series, which is based on 90s American traditional heavy metal. So look for an episode in the coming weeks on in that series.
Sweet. Jim, anything brewing over in Eihwaz land or?
No, it's quiet. It's okay. Everybody needs to go order your Glorious Dead album now. Support Marty and TJ's awesome death metal extravaganza. Come on, don't be a poser.
Yep, they're in, folks. They arrived from the plant and they turned out pretty good. So they'll be digging into orders here soon.
Nice purple and black splatters. Beautiful.
Yep. Okay. Well, I guess that's it. Yep. I can't think of anything else. So thank you everybody for coming and embrace your inner collector scum. That's what we're all here for. We're here to encourage it. And until Friday, we'll see y'all later. Cheers, everyone.
Watching you, TJ. You better come. I'm calling you out. Here it is. Here it is. Don't think you're getting off easy. I'm closing this episode. This is a reminder to you. You are watching this. You better show up next week after talking all that mess for the past couple of weeks. I saw you in the chat last Friday, too. There you are. There you are. Go ahead. Go ahead. Here it is. The gauntlet's been thrown. Show up or shut up.
Nice.
See ya.